Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Next Baseline. I am your podcast host, Danny DeJesus, and this podcast is about life resets and what it takes to reach your next baseline. And for this episode, sometimes the first sign that your life is changing does not start because of some major event that has happened, or what I tend to call that collapsible moment in your life. And sometimes the first sign is really that you no longer want to give your energy to the same people, places, conversations, or demands that used to feel normal and everyday to you. And so for me, I have noticed this through solitude, through spending time with myself and being introspective. And there are moments, or I should say, they were moments throughout my adult life where I have not wanted or had the desire to always socialize. I don't want to do, I may not want to go out for a drink. I may not want to go out to dinner. And sometimes, or a lot of times, even because I just have a lot of anxiety sometimes, I don't want to be in a crowded room where I feel like I can't get away. And for me, sometimes the best moments that I've had in my adult life, especially in my 30s, was really being at home, quiet, and alone. And I'm not saying alone as in just by myself. What I mean is low low stimuli. So I'm okay with my immediate circle. And when I mean by my immediate circle, my loved ones, I'm okay with being around them. But in terms of the outside world, you know, I have felt, at least for myself, that that is not a place I always want to be. And And here's the thing, I know I cannot be the only one that feels this way. And for a while, I actually wondered if that meant something that was at least how I felt about everyday life. I sometimes wondered if that meant something was actually wrong with me. But over time, I think I started to see things differently. And, for me, maybe it's not really about becoming or being disconnected from life per se. And in fact, I think what I've found, or what I've concluded, is that my energy was trying to tell me a very, very different story about how I want to invest my time and my energy and the things that are going to make me feel good, essentially. And so where before in my 20s I felt a certain way, and then in my early 30s, and now in my late 30s, about to be my early 40s come next year, I would tell you my life has evolved and transitioned for a wide range of reasons. Because for me, um, life to some degree has taken its toll, to some degree. And I know I can't be the only one that feels like life sometimes takes a toll on you. And for me, I've experienced divorce, financial ruin, professional pressures. I've experienced multiple bouts of child custody situations, failed relationships, and then also years of responsibility. Also, for me, has changed much of the access that I actually want to give, uh, to give the world to. And so even now, a room full of people can sometimes make me feel anxious. Small talk can actually make me feel pretty drained. And then other people's, at least what I feel like is other people's nonsense, can feel like it's too much for me to carry or want to necessarily deal with. And so before I go any further, so what do I mean by nonsense? I'm not a big fan of other people's drama or other people's self-induced challenges. I'm not a fan of that. And sometimes that could be very, very draining to deal with from an emotional perspective. And so, and then I walk away drained and feeling anxious, and I don't necessarily want to deal with that. And so with that, looking at all of this, the question for me is no longer about why am I like this, but rather the question now is, where do I actually want my energy to go? Where do I want to point my energy towards? And this is the question that this episode is really designed to explore, because this is not just about wanting to be alone. This is about realizing that some chapters of life require so much from you that at some point, I feel like we all have to ask ourselves whether that chapter still fits the person we are actually becoming, or do we need something else? Do we need something different? And for me, that question has started showing up really around my military service. And so, I joined the military back in 2005. I joined the Air Force. I've been in the military since I was 18, and I'm 39 years old now. And so, what that means is I've given 21 years of my life, of my adult life, late teen years to adult life, into service across the Air Force and now Space Force. I served in the Air Force for about 15 years before crossing over to the Space Force. And yes, I'm proud of that service. I have no regrets about that per se, but I also have to be honest where I'm at, where I feel I am these days, and that's that military service demands a lot of your time, focus, your energy, sometimes your 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 physical body, a lot of sacrifices across the family, flexibility, and then even you have to keep showing up despite the pressures. And so for a long time, I was able to meet those needs. I was able to meet those demands. But as I think about it, I think I'm in a place of transition where I feel like I no longer desire those same demands the same way that I once did. I don't hunger for that pace anymore because the truth is I'm getting tired, not necessarily broken or bitter. I'm just being very honest in terms of how I feel right now. And after some deep soul searching over the last 6 months or so, I think I've come to the place where, I'm considering it. Maybe it's time to hang up the uniform and then point my direction, my energy in other places that I think it's time. It's time. And that's not me walking away per se. It's not me quitting. But what it is, it's recognizing that my service may be ready to be vectored towards something else. And for me, it could be continuing to build Elevata's coaching and investing more time in coaching other people, helping other people navigate their own transitions. It could be also creating more frameworks that help people think clearly when their own life changes, not just, right now I built C2R2E, which stands for collapse, confrontation, realignment, reclamation, and elevation. So I have plenty of content that explains what that is. But maybe it's just really focusing on helping others to elevate, helping others work toward something more meaningful for them and for me. And I think this is a lot of what my North Star is for this next chapter. And for me, it's about meaning. It's not about chasing status or position. I don't want any more pressure in my life, and I don't need to prove that I can carry more than what I've carried. I think it's time that I find something more meaningful for me that I find more personally fulfilling. And I'm not saying that this new direction for me is going to be something that's going to be easy, and it does not mean that every decision will be simple. It also does not mean that this next chapter will come without uncertainty. Every chapter and every transition in life is going to come out with some sort of level of uncertainty. But what it does mean is that I want to deliberately choose where I go, how I serve, and who I serve. And I think that's the shift. Because at some point, life, in my own opinion, cannot only be measured by what you have endured, what you produced, or what you sacrifice. It also has to be measured by whether the life you are building still has meaning to you. And maybe this is where solitude and introspection really becomes useful, because silence, I think, gives you room to hear what constant motion and stimulation tend to hide from you. Solitude, I think, helps you notice what drains you. It helps to notice what can restore you. And it helps you notice where you are still giving energy out of duty, habit, guilt, fear, or an old previous identity that's no longer working for you, for the person that you are today. And so for me, I found my solace in meaningful small group relationships that demand very little of me, people that I trust, people who don't always require some sort of level of performance from me, people who understand that connection does not have to be constant for it to be real. And that is the kind of connection I value now. And I think that is the lesson that this episode of this podcast episode is employing today. That the goal is not to disappear from life. Rather, the goal is to build a life where your energy is placed with deliberate intention. So before I conclude this episode, I want to leave you with a moment of reflection, as I always try to end every episode with something to reflect on. And so this is what I would ask that you ask yourself. Here are a couple questions. Take out a piece of paper, write some notes down for yourself, pause it if you need to. But here's what I have for you. Where in your life are you still giving energy to a chapter that may already be complete? So take a second and write some notes down. Where in your life are you still giving energy to a chapter that may already be complete? Question 2. Where are you staying connected out of habit instead of meaning? I'll say it again. Where are you staying connected out of habit instead of meaning? Question 3. Where are you exhausted, not because you are weak, but because your energy is being spent in places that no longer fit? One more time. Where are you exhausted, not because you are weak, but because your energy is being spent in places that no longer fit the person that you are today or who you are becoming? And I know I added on a little bit to that last question. Final question. If you were being honest with yourself, what would your next chapter need to look like in order to feel more aligned with the person you are becoming? So with that, don't rush to answer any of these. Pause if you need to. Sit with it for a little bit. Because sometimes your next baseline begins when you stop asking, how much longer can I keep doing this? But rather you start asking, where does my energy need to go now? Where does my energy belong now? So with that, I'm going to wish you peace, love, joy, and everlasting happiness. I know these are probably some ideals to strive for, but I do honestly mean that I wish you all the best in your own journey of life transition. So with that, until next time, I look forward to connecting with you on another episode of The Next Baseline.